Welcome, dear listener, to another evening in which history will keep you company. Wherever you are, whether in the quiet of your bedroom, on a train as twilight stretches across the horizon, or perhaps in the last calm minutes before sleep, I invite you to lean back, close your eyes if you wish, and let me guide you through a story that is at once familiar and strange. Tonight, we journey into the Colosseum, Rome's great theater of blood and glory. And we follow not just the clash of swords, the roar of lions, or the cries of thousands of voices. We follow something smaller, subtler, and in many ways far more powerful: the thumb. A simple gesture, yet a gesture that, according to legend, decided whether a gladiator would live or die. You have seen it in films. The emperor sits in his marble box, dressed in purple and gold. A gladiator lies bleeding in the sand, raising his hand in a silent plea. The emperor looks to the crowd, stretches out his arm, and slowly, with deliberate cruelty, turns his thumb downward. The crowd erupts. The condemned gladiator lowers his head, and the victor finishes the kill. It is an image so vivid, so universal, that it feels ancient. And yet, what if I told you this image, so firmly etched in our imagination, may never have existed in the way we think? What if the Romans did not use a thumbs down to condemn and a thumbs up to save, but something entirely different? Before we explore that truth, let us set the stage. The Colosseum, completed in the year 80 after Christ, was a marvel of engineering. It rose from the heart of Rome like a mountain of stone, with 80 entrances, towering arches, and seats for 50,000 people. Its real name was the Flavian Amphitheater, after the dynasty that built it, but to Romans it was simply the Amphitheatrum, the place. It was not just a building, it was a statement. Rome had conquered the world, and now it would conquer death itself, turning life and blood into a performance for the masses. The games held here were vast affairs, lasting for days, sometimes weeks. They began with animal hunts, venatanes, in which exotic beasts imported from Africa and the East were slaughtered to prove Rome's dominion over nature. Lions, tigers, leopards, bears, even giraffes and crocodiles appeared. Then came executions, staged as cruel theater. Criminals were burned, beheaded, or thrown to the beasts, often reenacting myths in what scholars later called fatal charades. Imagine a man dressed as Icarus pushed from a platform to fall to his death, or another playing Orpheus torn apart by wild animals. But the true heart of the games was the gladiatorial combat. These fighters, some slaves, some prisoners of war, some free men seeking glory, faced each other in duels that blended skill, training, and spectacle. They were armed not randomly, but as archetypes. The heavily armored secutor with shield and sword, the lightly armed retiarius with net and trident, the fish-crested myrmillo, the curved sword Thracian. Each pairing was designed like a chess match, balancing strength and agility, defense and attack, brutality and elegance. The crowd loved it. They shouted, chanted, threw flowers, waved cloths, and demanded outcomes. But above all, they signaled with their thumbs. Now let us pause. What did that signal mean? Here the story begins to twist. Roman poets Martial and Juvenal, writing in the 1st century, both mention the thumb as a sign of judgment. Martial uses the phrase pollice verso, with a turned thumb, to describe a demand for death. He also uses pollis primer, to press the thumb, to describe mercy. Juvenal echoes the same idea. To press the thumb into the palm was to sheath the sword, to show mercy. To turn or extend the thumb was to unsheath it, to kill. But note the ambiguity. Neither Martial nor Juvenal specifies which way the thumb turned. Was it upward, like a sword raised for a strike? Was it sideways, thrust like a blade into the air? Was it downward, stabbing toward the earth? We cannot know. The Latin words do not tell us direction. They tell us symbolism. Concealed thumb, mercy. Exposed thumb, death. And yet, centuries later, when artists and storytellers rediscovered Rome, they craved clarity. They gave the gestures shapes we could see. Painters in the Renaissance imagined emperors lowering their thumbs to condemn, raising them to spare. By the 19th century, the French painter Jean-Léon Gérôme sealed the myth in his famous canvas Polis Verso, where Roman women thrust their thumbs downward to demand a gladiator's death. From that moment on, the thumbs down meant death. The thumbs up meant mercy. And the ambiguity of the Latin poets was forgotten. But let us not get ahead of ourselves. Tonight, I want you to walk with me not just through history, but through stories. Stories of gladiators, emperors, and ordinary Romans who raised their hands in judgment. Picture the arena again. A gladiator falls, bleeding, exhausted, yet still alive. He raises his hand, a gesture of surrender. The crowd hushes. This is the moment. The editor of the games, perhaps even the emperor himself, looks to the people. And the people respond. Thousands of thumbs rise. Some pressed into fists, calling for mercy. Others extended outward, demanding blood. The amphitheater becomes a forest of hands, a storm of voices. The emperor hesitates, then raises his own hand. His thumb turns. The verdict is delivered. For the crowd, this was more than entertainment. It was power. In a city where political voice was limited, the amphitheater gave the masses a taste of decision-making. Their cries, their gestures shaped outcomes. Their thumbs held sway over life and death. The Colosseum was Rome's stage, but also Rome's mirror, reflecting its hunger for control, its thirst for spectacle, and its complicated dance with mercy and cruelty. The thumb, then, was not just a gesture. It was a ritual. It embodied Rome's values, its politics, its philosophy. It turned the arena into a court, the emperor into a judge, and the people into a jury. As you drift deeper into this story, let me promise you this. Over the next chapters, we will follow the thumb across centuries. We will see it in Roman texts and mosaics, in medieval manuscripts, in Renaissance art, in Victorian painting, in Hollywood cinema, and even in the digital icons of our own time. We will see how a gesture born in blood became a symbol of approval, how mercy turned into like, how condemnation turned into dislike. And along the way, we will meet gladiators who fought bravely, emperors who played to the crowd, poets who puzzled over metaphors, painters who shaped myths, and filmmakers who made them immortal. The thumb will guide us from Rome to now, from sand to screen. So settle in. The Colosseum awaits. The crowd is gathering. The sand is ready. The beasts roar in their cages, and the gladiators tighten their grips on sword and shield. And above them all, 1,000 hands rise, waiting for the signal. Tonight, we will follow the thumb. Let us step away from the emperor's box and walk down into the shadowed corridors beneath the Colosseum, the Hypogeum. Here, away from the sunlight that bleaches the sand above, the air is thick with the smell of animals, sweat, and iron. Chains rattle, pulleys creak, and in small cells men prepare for battle. These are the gladiators, the true protagonists of our story. To understand the power of the thumb, we must understand what it meant to them. For a gladiator, the thumb was not a symbol. It was a sentence. One turn could grant him another day of life, another chance at glory. Another turn could cut his story short forever. Gladiators came from many walks of life. Some were prisoners of war, dragged from distant provinces conquered by Rome. Others were slaves, sold into the schools by their masters. A few were criminals, condemned to fight as punishment. And then there were volunteers, free men who, driven by poverty, desperation, or sheer lust for fame, bound themselves by oath to the gladiator's life. This oath was no light matter. It required them to accept branding, chains, flogging, even death by sword. Once sworn, they belonged to the ludus, the gladiator school. Training was rigorous. In the Ludus Magnus, the great school near the Colosseum, men drilled with wooden swords heavier than real ones, building strength and endurance. They practiced endlessly, thrust, block, feint, retreat. Their bodies were honed into weapons, but their minds, too, were shaped for performance. For in the arena, it was not enough to win. One had to win with style, with courage, with spectacle. A gladiator who fought bravely, who entertained the crowd even in defeat, could earn mercy. One who faltered, who showed cowardice, invited death. Consider the types of gladiators, each a role in Rome's theater of violence. The secutor, heavily armored, chased the retiarius, the net fighter, who danced lightly with trident and net, dodging and striking like a fisherman hunting prey. The murmillo, with his fish-crested helmet, often faced the Thracian, wielding a curved sword and small shield. These pairings were not random. They were designed for contrast, for balance, for drama. The crowd delighted in the spectacle of opposites, clashing. Gladiators lived hard lives, but they were not always despised. Paradoxically, they were both outcasts and celebrities. They were slaves, yet admired for their bravery. They were condemned, yet desired by women of high rank. Graffiti scratched on Roman walls reveal admiration, even adoration. Salatus the Thracian makes all the girls sigh. Their images appeared on lamps and cups, like the sports stars of their day. And when they died, some were buried with honors, their graves marked by inscriptions celebrating their victories. Yet always the shadow of the thumb loomed. Imagine being in the arena. You have fought hard, the sun beating down, sweat stinging your eyes. Your opponent strikes, and you stumble, falling to your knees. The crowd roars. You raise your finger, the gesture of surrender. Now you wait. You wait for the judgment, not from the gods, not from fate, but from thousands of strangers and one man in purple. Their hands rise. Thumbs pressed, you live. Thumbs extended, you die. The tension of that moment is almost unbearable. It is theater at its purest. The gladiator, bloodied but alive, becomes both actor and audience, caught in the drama of his own fate. The crowd, drunk on power, relishes its role as judge. And the emperor, basking in attention, plays the final arbiter, balancing mercy with cruelty. This interplay made the Colosseum more than a killing ground. It was a stage of values. The Romans celebrated virtus, courage, strength, endurance. A gladiator who showed these, even in defeat, was often spared. Mercy was not weakness, but recognition of worth. On the other hand, if a gladiator begged or cowered, the crowd demanded blood. Death, then, became not punishment, but purification, a way of erasing dishonor. The thumb, in this context, was both democratic and despotic. Democratic because the crowd's collective will mattered. Despotic because the emperor could override it, using mercy or severity to display his power. Sometimes emperors indulged the bloodlust of the crowd. Other times they defied it, sparing lives to demonstrate magnanimity. Either way, the thumb symbolized control. The control of Rome over men, over nature, over life itself. Let us pause here to tell a story recorded by the historian Suetonius. Emperor Augustus, known for his careful image, once attended games where the crowd demanded the death of a gladiator. Instead, Augustus spared him, ignoring the bloodthirsty cries. It was a calculated move. By showing mercy, he presented himself as a ruler above the mob, a father to his people. The thumb became not just a crowd's tool, but an emperor's message. Another story comes from the poet Martial. He described how a gladiator, defeated but admired, was saved by the crowd pressing their thumbs. The image is striking. Thousands of hands, fists clenched, thumbs hidden, a silent chorus of mercy. It shows us how the gesture could be as moving in kindness as in cruelty. But mercy was not always granted. Many gladiators died, their lives cut short by the turn of a thumb. Yet even in death, they became part of Rome's spectacle. Their bodies were dragged away, their names sometimes remembered, sometimes forgotten. For the crowd, the drama was complete. For Rome, the message was clear. Life and death are subject to the will of the people, embodied in the hand. What fascinates us centuries later is how this single gesture, ambiguous, simple, came to embody the entire spirit of Rome. The Colosseum was not just about killing. It was about performance, judgment, symbolism. The thumb encapsulated all of it. Think for a moment about our own world. Do we not still live in arenas of judgment? We watch athletes, actors, politicians, and we cheer or boo. We raise hands in parliaments. We press buttons on phones. We click likes or dislikes on screens. Our gestures have changed form, but not function. We still crave the power to decide, to approve, to condemn. We still believe in the theater of judgment. And the gladiators knew this. They trained not only their bodies, but their personas. Some cultivated reputations, becoming favorites of the crowd. Others fought with reckless bravery, seeking to win admiration even in defeat. They understood that survival depended not only on skill, but on spectacle. If the crowd loved you, if the crowd pressed their thumbs for you, you lived. If not, you died. This truth gives us a chilling insight into Rome. The thumb was not just a gesture. It was the blade of society itself. It turned men into actors, crowds into juries, emperors into gods. And through it, Rome displayed its greatest paradox: cruelty dressed as entertainment, mercy dressed as power, life and death decided by a flick of the hand. As you drift deeper into this story, imagine once more the silence before the verdict. A gladiator kneels, blood staining the sand, eyes lifted toward the emperor. The crowd holds its breath. Hands rise, thousands of them, fists clenched or thumbs extended. The emperor waits, savoring the tension. Then, slowly, deliberately, he raises his own hand. The thumb turns. The arena erupts, and a man's fate is sealed. This was Rome's theater, and the thumb was its script. The dawn breaks over Rome, and with it the promise of spectacle. Long before the first trumpet sounds, crowds begin to gather at the Flavian amphitheater. The Colosseum rises against the pale morning sky, its arches casting shadows across the cobbled streets. Merchants set up stalls selling bread, figs, honey cakes, wine diluted with water, and sausages sizzling on skewers. Children chatter, men place bets, women adjust their veils and jewelry. The city hums with expectation, for today is a day of games. The games were not occasional diversions. They were central to Rome's identity, binding emperor and people in a ritual of power. For the elite, they displayed wealth and generosity. For the emperor, they demonstrated control, magnanimity, or ruthlessness. For the crowd, they were release, catharsis, and participation in the drama of empire. And so the amphitheater filled, tier by tier, from senators on marble benches near the arena to commoners perched high above, squinting for a view. The morning opened with the Venationes, the hunts. Trumpets blared, the gates clanged open, and from the hypogeum emerged cages containing beasts from across the empire. A leopard padded into the sunlight, ears twitching. A lion roared, its mane glowing in the golden light. Bears lumbered, bulls snorted, even ostriches and giraffes sometimes appeared. To the Romans, these animals were more than creatures. They were symbols of conquest, proof that Rome's reach extended across deserts, jungles, and mountains. To slay them was to reaffirm dominion over nature itself. The bestiari, lightly armed hunters, faced the animals with spear and sword. Sometimes, elaborate sets transformed the arena into miniature landscapes, forests of painted trees, rocky outcrops, even rivers. From trapdoors, animals appeared suddenly, leaping upon men unprepared. The crowd gasped, roared, cheered. Blood stained the sand. For the spectators, it was both terrifying and exhilarating, a reminder of Rome's power and man's fragility. By midday, the hunts gave way to executions. These were not simple beheadings or hangings. They were theater, cruelly imaginative, designed to blend punishment with entertainment. Criminals condemned ad bestias, to the beasts, were stripped, tied, and thrown before lions or bears. Others were burned alive, their deaths framed as enactments of myths. One might play Prometheus, chained as an eagle tore at his flesh. Another might be cast as Icarus, hurled from a platform to his doom. These spectacles, later called fatal charades, blurred the line between myth and punishment, entertainment and justice. The crowd, fed with bread by the state, consumed death as if it were art. It was a brutal interlude, a reminder of Rome's authority and the price of disobedience. Yet even in horror, there was spectacle, and the people watched, their faces alight with fascination. But the true climax of the day awaited, the gladiatorial contests. After a brief pause, when attendants raked the sand and spread fresh sawdust to absorb blood, the trumpets sounded again. A procession entered, known as the Pampa. First came musicians, their horns blaring, then officials clad in white. Finally, the gladiators themselves, marching in formation. Some carried their helmets under their arms, revealing faces hardened by training and scars. Others wore full armor, their visors hiding all but their eyes. Together, they saluted the emperor with the famous phrase, Ave Caesar, morituri te salutant. Hail Caesar! Those who are about to die salute you. Whether this salute was spoken often or only in rare ceremonies, it has become emblematic of Rome's theater of death. For the crowd, it was electrifying. For the gladiators, it was ritual, a reminder of the bargain they had struck with fate. The matches began, pairing different types of fighters. A secutular, with his smooth helmet designed to deflect the net of a retiarius, squared off against his lightly armed opponent, trident flashing in the sun. A myrmillo, his heavy shield gleaming, clashed with a Thracian, whose curved sword sought gaps in the armor. Each duel was carefully staged for variety and balance, ensuring the crowd never tired. The fighting was real, but it was also theater. Gladiators trained not only to survive, but to entertain. They exaggerated blows, shouted war cries, and performed maneuvers with flair. A skilled gladiator could earn admiration even in defeat. The crowd loved bravery, despised cowardice, and rewarded spectacle above all. Now imagine a fight reaching its climax. A retiarius has entangled his opponent in a net, trident pressing against the man's chest. The crowd roars for the kill. The trapped gladiator falls, raising a finger to plead for mercy. Silence ripples across the amphitheater. Thousands of eyes turn to the emperor. Thousands of hands rise. This is the moment of the thumb. Some in the crowd press their thumbs into their fists, the sign of mercy. Others thrust their thumbs outward, demanding death. The amphitheater becomes a storm of hands and voices. "Mite!" shout those who want him spared. "Iugura!" cry those who demand his throat be cut. The emperor watches, weighing the will of the people, savoring the tension. Then, slowly, he raises his own hand. His thumb turns outward. The verdict is death. The victor strikes, the vanquished falls, and the sand drinks blood once more. But not every match ended in death. Contrary to popular belief, many gladiators survived their bouts. They were expensive to train and valuable to their owners. The crowd did not always crave slaughter. Often they admired skill and courage, rewarding fighters with life. A gladiator who fought bravely could build a career, winning freedom after many victories, even becoming wealthy. Some earned such fame that women of noble families pursued them, scandalizing Roman society. Yet the fear of the thumb was always present. No matter how skilled, no matter how admired, every gladiator knew his fate could hinge on a gesture. The thumb was merciless, democratic, and despotic at once. It embodied the will of the crowd, the authority of the emperor, the theater of Rome itself. The games stretched on through the afternoon, match after match, death after mercy. Dust rose in golden clouds, mingling with the smell of sweat and blood. The sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the arena. At last, the final bout ended. Trumpets sounded. The emperor departed, carried in pomp. The crowd spilled into the streets, buzzing with talk of the day's battles, arguing over who fought bravely, who should have been spared, who deserved their fate. And then silence returned. The Colosseum stood empty, its sand soaked with blood, its stones echoing with the ghosts of roars and cries. Beneath, in the hypogeum, attendants cleaned cages, reset machinery, and prepared for the next day. For the games would return. The thumb would rise and fall again. To live one day in the Colosseum was to see Rome itself in miniature. Its cruelty, its grandeur, its politics, its theater, all condensed into sand, stone, and gestures. The hunts celebrated conquest. The executions displayed authority. The gladiators embodied courage and performance. And above it all, the thumb ruled, deciding life and death with a flick. As you imagine this day fading into twilight, picture yourself leaving the amphitheater with the Roman crowd. The sky is painted crimson, the air filled with the hum of voices. You feel exhilarated, disturbed, alive. You have witnessed not just sport, but society in motion, empire in performance. And you know deep down that tomorrow the thumb will decide again. When the last gladiators fell silent and the Colosseum's gates rusted shut, the story of the thumb did not vanish. Like many fragments of Roman life, it survived as whispers, as words in texts copied and recopied by monks, as vague memories that drifted through centuries. Rome's empire had crumbled, but the fascination with its power, its cruelty, and its theater never truly disappeared. In the Middle Ages, Europe looked upon Rome with both awe and suspicion. To the Church, the gladiatorial games represented pagan decadence. The amphitheaters that remained were treated as curiosities, sometimes quarried for stone to build cathedrals, sometimes mythologized as places of martyrdom where Christians had died. The Colosseum itself became known as an arena of saints' sacrifice, even though evidence is scarce. Yet, within this Christian reinterpretation, the thumb, pollice verso, still flickered faintly in texts. Medieval scholars copying the works of Juvenal and Martial encountered these puzzling phrases: pollice premere, to press the thumb, and pollice verso, with a turned thumb. But without the living theater of the Colosseum to guide them, meanings blurred. Some imagined the thumb turned downward, stabbing into the ground like a dagger. Others guessed it turned upward, a blade thrust skyward. None could say for sure, and so ambiguity deepened, like a shadow growing longer. Art of the Middle Ages rarely depicted gladiators, but it loved gestures. In illuminated manuscripts, saints raised fingers in blessing, devils pointed accusing claws, angels extended hands to guide souls. The body spoke with divine authority. If the thumb itself faded, the idea of hand gestures as verdicts endured. Trials by ordeal, for example, demanded that men thrust hands into boiling water or grasp hot iron to prove innocence. The hand became proof of divine judgment, echoing the old Roman idea that fate could be read in flesh. By the Renaissance, Europe's hunger for antiquity revived Rome in dazzling color. Scholars studied Latin with passion. Painters and sculptors filled palaces with reimagined Caesars. And architects echoed the arches of the Colosseum in their designs. Gladiators strode once more across canvases and stage plays, not as slaves, but as symbols of human struggle, bravery, and fatal beauty. It was in this rebirth that the thumb returned in new form. Renaissance artists and writers, interpreting pollice verso with fresh eyes, sought clarity where none existed. They wanted gestures that the audience could see, understand, and dramatize. And so they decided. A thumb pointed down meant death. A thumb raised meant life. This interpretation made sense to them. Downward was decline, the grave, the fall of the defeated. Upward was life, salvation, rising. It fit Christian symbolism as well. Heaven above, hell below. The Romans may not have thought this way, but Renaissance minds steeped in allegory did. And so the thumb was reborn, not as it had been, but as the world wished it to be. Theatrical productions embraced this imagery. Emperors on stage, condemned with a flourish of the downward thumb, sparing with a benevolent raise. The gesture became iconic, a shorthand for fate. Audiences loved it, and little by little, the myth cemented. The Enlightenment carried it further. Scholars debated the Latin texts, but popular culture had already chosen its path. The thumb down was death. The thumb up was life. Illustrations in books, engravings in magazines, all repeated the same imagery. And then came the 19th century, the century of spectacle, of museums, of grand historical paintings. Enter Jean-Léon Gérôme. In 1872, Gérôme unveiled his painting Pollis Verso. Step into that canvas for a moment. The Colosseum blazes with light, its tiers packed with roaring spectators. On the sand below, a defeated gladiator sprawls, eyes wide with fear, while the victor stands above him, sword poised. And in the stands, Roman women in brilliant robes thrust their thumbs downward, faces alight with merciless joy. The emperor, aloof and stern, echoes their verdict. The crowd demands death, and the thumb delivers it. The painting was electrifying. Gérôme was a master of academic style, blending meticulous archaeological detail with dramatic flair. Every buckle, every helmet gleamed with authenticity, yet the scene pulsed with emotion. Viewers gasped, critics praised, the public adored, and most of all, the myth of the thumb was sealed. Before Gérôme, the idea of the thumbs down was known. After Gérôme, it was gospel. His painting imprinted the image so deeply on the Western imagination that it became unquestioned truth. When people thought of Rome, they thought of gladiators. And when they thought of gladiators, they thought of the thumbs down. Hollywood later amplified it. In the silent films of the early 20th century, emperors turned their thumbs downward in exaggerated arcs, condemning gladiators as the audience gasped. By the time Ridley Scott's Gladiator arrived in 2000, the gesture was so ingrained that no one doubted it. When Joaquin Phoenix's Commodus hovered his hand, thumb wavering before finally plunging it downward, audiences across the globe understood instantly. No Latin texts were needed, no footnotes, no scholarly debates. The gesture had become universal. But scholars, quietly, continued to remind us, the Romans may not have done it this way. Martial's pressed thumb meant mercy. An extended thumb meant death. The direction, up or down, was never specified. What we believe may be an inversion, a mirror. When we raise a thumb today to signal approval, we may be echoing the Roman sign for execution. When we turn it down to reject, we may be echoing their sign for mercy. Is this a distortion of history? Perhaps. But it is also a triumph of imagination. History often leaves us fragments, and humans fill the gaps with symbols that resonate. The thumbs down resonates because it is simple, clear, dramatic. It tells a story in an instant, life or death, yes or no, rise or fall. Gérôme gave us an image that satisfied the hunger for clarity, and once he gave it, we never let it go. This journey, from Rome's ambiguity to the Renaissance's clarity to Gérôme's drama, shows us how myths are born. They are not lies, they are truths of a different kind. Truths about what we wish history to mean. The Romans gave us a gesture. The Renaissance gave it direction. Gérôme gave it immortality. Hollywood gave it global reach. And now, every time we lift or lower our thumbs, we speak a language shaped not by Rome, but by centuries of reinterpretation. Think about that the next time you watch a movie scene of the Colosseum. The emperor's thumb turns, the crowd erupts, the gladiator accepts his fate. It is powerful, it is iconic, but it may not be Roman at all. It may be ours. And perhaps that is the deeper lesson. The thumb is not just a Roman story, it is a human story. It reveals how we crave symbols, how we reshape the past to fit our imagination, how we carry fragments across centuries until they become whole in new forms. The Colosseum gave us the raw material. The Renaissance carved it into shape. Jerome painted it into permanence. Hollywood broadcast it to the world. And we, in our everyday lives, keep it alive. So when you raise your thumb in approval or turn it down in rejection, remember, you are part of this lineage. You are echoing not only Rome, but the Renaissance, the 19th century, the silver screen. Your gesture is layered with centuries of meaning, a palimpsest of history and myth. The Colosseum may be in ruins, but the thumb thrives. The Colosseum has fallen into ruin. Jerome's painting has etched the image of the thumbs down into our imagination, and Hollywood has broadcast it across the world. But the story of the thumb does not end there. In fact, it expands far beyond Rome, becoming part of the universal language of gestures, woven into politics, religion, ritual, and finally, into the digital screens that surround us today. To understand this journey, let us first consider a simple truth. Long before writing, long before alphabets carved words into clay or parchment, humans spoke with their bodies. A raised hand meant peace. A pointed finger meant direction. Arms crossed meant defiance. Gestures preceded language, and in many ways, they still surpass it. They are immediate, visible, primal. They cut through barriers of speech and culture. The thumb, in particular, has always carried weight. Its mobility set us apart as a species, giving us the ability to grip tools, wield weapons, build civilizations. No wonder it became symbolic. The same digit that held the sword in Rome also judged whether that sword would be sheathed or plunged. But beyond Rome, other cultures developed their own languages of the hand. In ancient Greece, citizens in the assembly voted not with secret ballots, but with raised hands, arms stretched high to signal agreement or dissent. Democracy was embodied, visible. The gesture of the hand was the voice of the people. In early Christian ritual, the hand became sacred. Priests raised their right hands in blessing, fingers arranged in symbolic patterns to represent the Trinity. Congregations lifted palms in prayer, open hands as offerings to heaven. Here, the gesture was not about life or death in the arena, but about salvation and communion with the divine. In medieval courts, hands sealed oaths. To swear loyalty, a vassal placed his hands within the Lord's, binding himself in visible submission. Juries gave verdicts by lifting or lowering hands. Justice, like in the Colosseum, was performed by gesture. Consider the world of tournaments, those medieval echoes of gladiator contests. Knights fought before lords and ladies, their fates sometimes decided by audience reaction. A tilt of the hand, a nod of the head, a raised kerchief from the stands, these gestures carried verdicts as powerful as words. The knight who fought bravely might be crowned with flowers, the one who failed disgraced. Here, too, performance was judged by visible signs, and the audience relished its role. But it is in politics that gestures found their most enduring stage. In revolutionary France, assemblies of the people often voted by show of hands, a sea of arms deciding the fate of kings and laws. In parliaments across Europe and later in America, hands were raised to approve or reject motions. Even when paper ballots replaced them, the symbolism endured. A hand lifted meant power, decision, will. And then came the 20th century, when gestures entered the age of mass media. Suddenly, photographs and films carried images of hands to millions. A salute could unify or terrify. The raised fist became a symbol of resistance and solidarity, from workers' movements to civil rights struggles. The V sign, two fingers raised, embodied victory during World War II and peace in the decades that followed. These gestures, like the thumb in Rome, condensed complex ideas into simple motions that anyone could understand in an instant. The thumb itself took on new roles in this modern world. Soldiers during World War II used the thumbs up to signal readiness, especially pilots on airstrips. A quick, visible gesture cut through the roar of engines. It spread quickly, becoming a universal sign of all clear, good, let's go. From military necessity, it entered popular culture. Soon, children across the world flashed thumbs up to show approval, and thumbs down to show disapproval. Rome's ancient gesture, inverted by centuries, had been reborn in modern form. Hollywood helped again. In westerns, heroes gave thumbs up after a victory. In comedies, clowns exaggerated thumbs down to boo villains. On television, from sitcoms to talent shows, the gesture became shorthand for success or failure. Audiences needed no explanation. They knew instinctively what it meant. But the most dramatic transformation came with the digital age. In 2009, Facebook introduced the like button, shaped as a simple thumbs up. It was a design choice with enormous consequences. Suddenly, billions of people across the world were raising their digital thumbs every day, approving posts, photographs, jokes, and ideas with a flick of the finger. The gesture became currency. Posts with many thumbs up thrived. Those with few vanished into obscurity. The crowd of the Colosseum had been reborn online. The arena was now infinite. Its sand replaced by screens, its gladiators replaced by ordinary people vying for attention. And once again, the thumb ruled. The irony is striking. In Rome, an exposed thumb condemned. In our world, an exposed thumb praises. We have inverted the meaning, but not the function. We still use the thumb to decide what lives and what dies. Not flesh and blood, but content, reputations, careers. A storm of thumbs down can bury a video, ruin a brand, silence a voice. The gesture is no longer life or death in the literal sense, but its symbolic power remains lethal. Think of YouTube, where until recently, the thumbs down icon stood beside the thumbs up. A single glance told you whether the crowd cheered or booed. It was the Colosseum revisited, a performance judged instantly, brutally by the masses. The algorithms behind our screens became the new emperors, weighing the crowd's verdicts and deciding what would rise or fall. This is why the story of the thumb resonates so deeply. It shows us that humanity has always craved simplicity in judgment. Complex debates are slow, nuanced. Gestures are fast, clear, final. Raise the thumb, approve. Lower it, reject. In a chaotic world, gestures cut through confusion. But there is danger in this simplicity. Rome's thumb killed men in an instant, sometimes unfairly. Our thumbs today can destroy reputations just as quickly. The speed of judgment leaves little room for mercy, little space for reflection. We are still the crowd, roaring for blood or mercy, our hands raised in unison. Only the arena has changed. Yet there is also comfort in the continuity. It reminds us that we are connected to our ancestors, that the gestures we make casually on phones and in stadiums echo those made by Romans 2,000 years ago. History is not distant. It is alive in our hands. So when you scroll through your feed and tap the thumbs up, pause for a moment. Imagine the roar of the Colosseum, the crowd pressing or thrusting their thumbs, the emperor weighing the decision. You are part of that lineage. You carry Rome in your pocket. And when you see a storm of thumbs down bury a performance or condemn a politician, think of the crowd shouting "Eugula" in unison. Think of the gladiator kneeling, waiting for a verdict. The context has changed, but the essence is the same. The power of collective judgment embodied in a simple gesture. This, then, is the power of the thumb. Not just in Rome, not just in Jerome's painting, not just in Hollywood or on Facebook, but across cultures, across centuries. It is the hand of humanity itself, raised in decision, lowered in scorn, pressed in mercy. It is our oldest emoji, our eternal sign of judgment. And as long as humans gather to watch, to cheer, to condemn, the thumb will remain. The Colosseum still stands. Nearly 2,000 years after it first opened its gates under Emperor Titus, this vast amphitheater remains the beating heart of Rome's past, a monument both to the glory and to the cruelty of an empire. Its arches rise against the Roman sky, weathered by centuries of rain, earthquakes, and the quarrying hands of men who once tore away its stones to build churches and palaces. And yet, despite its scars, it endures. Step closer and you feel its gravity. Tourists stream through its gates every day, clutching cameras, speaking in dozens of languages. Some chatter eagerly, others walk silently, as if reverence demands quiet. The air smells faintly of dust and sun-warmed stone. Guides raise flags, voices echoing, "This was where the gladiators fought. This was where emperors sat. This was where the crowd decided life and death with a thumb." For many visitors, this is the moment of recognition. They may not know Martial or Juvenal, they may not know the Latin phrases pollice verso or pollice premire, but they know the myth of the thumbs up and thumbs down. They have seen it in paintings, in films, in culture. They can picture the emperor lowering his hand to condemn, raising it to save. Whether accurate or not, the image has become inseparable from the Colosseum itself. Walk inside, and the arena opens before you. The floor that once held sand is mostly gone, exposing the labyrinth of the hypogeum below, the cages, pulleys, and passages where gladiators and beasts once waited. The sun pours into the open circle, bleaching stone and shadow. Standing here, you can almost hear the roar of the crowd, feel the tension of thousands of eyes fixed on the sand. From the highest tiers, the view stretches across modern Rome. Buses crawl like insects, tourists sip espresso at cafes, the hum of scooters fills the air. Yet within these walls, time folds. You stand where senators once judged, where emperors once played gods, where ordinary Romans once raised their hands in judgment. The thumb may not rise anymore, but its ghost lingers in the stones. The Colosseum has become many things across centuries. In the Middle Ages, it was believed to be a site of Christian martyrdom. Legends claimed saints had been torn by beasts here, though evidence is thin. Pilgrims came to pray, and crosses were erected in memory of sacrifice. Later, popes quarried its stones to build St. Peter's Basilica and other monuments, cannibalizing the amphitheater even as they sanctified it. By the 18th century, it became a site of romantic ruin, painted by artists who saw in its arches the melancholy of fallen empire. Today, it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, one of the most visited monuments in the world. Millions walk through its arches each year, carrying away not stones, but memories. And what memory do they carry most? Not the engineering marvel, not the exact history of gladiatorial schools, but the image of the thumb. This shows us something profound about heritage. Facts may fade, but symbols endure. The Colosseum has been a quarry, a shrine, a ruin, a tourist attraction. Through all these changes, the story of the thumb has survived, simplified and dramatized, carried into every visitor's imagination. It is the narrative hook that makes sense of the ruin. This is where life and death were decided with a gesture. Stand in the Emperor's Box today. The marble seats are gone, but the place is marked. Look down upon the arena and imagine the view. Two gladiators clash, the crowd roars, one falls. He raises his hand in plea. The audience surges, thumbs rising in thousands. And you, standing where emperors once stood, feel the weight of decision. The gesture is invisible now, but you sense it, as if history still hovers in the air. The Colosseum has also become a mirror of ourselves. Tourists raise their own thumbs in photographs, echoing the gesture, sometimes in jest, sometimes with irony, sometimes without even realizing the depth of what they mimic. Social media is filled with pictures of visitors standing in the arena, thumbs up or down, reenacting the myth. The crowd may be gone, but the performance continues, reshaped for a new age. Consider how powerful this is. The Romans once filled this amphitheater with 50,000 voices. Today, millions of digital voices echo their gestures, broadcast across Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. The Colosseum's arena has moved into our pockets, but the symbolism remains unchanged. We are still spectators, we are still judges, and we are still obsessed with the drama of approval and rejection. And perhaps this is why the Colosseum continues to resonate. It is not just an ancient ruin. It is a metaphor for humanity's eternal fascination with spectacle and power. Every tourist who walks its corridors becomes both audience and actor, participating in a ritual that has lasted 2 millennia. Let us not forget the darker side. The Colosseum is also a graveyard. Tens of thousands of gladiators and animals died here. Their blood seeped into the sand, their cries echoed in these walls. The grandeur of the ruin masks the horror of its past. To walk here is to confront the paradox of Rome: civilization and brutality, art and cruelty, power and fragility. The thumb embodies this paradox perfectly. Mercy and death, humanity and savagery, all in one flick of a finger. Modern Rome wrestles with this duality. On the one hand, the Colosseum is celebrated as a wonder of the ancient world, a triumph of architecture, a symbol of Roman genius. On the other, it is remembered as a place of cruelty, of needless suffering, of blood turned into entertainment. The debate continues: should we admire it, mourn it, or both? For many, the answer lies in recognition. To admire the Colosseum is not to glorify its cruelty, but to acknowledge the depth of history. To remember the thumb is not to celebrate the power it held, but to reflect on our own fascination with judgment. For are we so different? Do we not still gather in stadiums to watch men collide? Still raise our thumbs online to approve or condemn? Still turn performance into judgment? The Colosseum reminds us that history is never truly gone. Its stones whisper, its arches frame the sky, its myth lives in our gestures. The thumb survives because we still need it. We still crave clarity, still hunger for simple signs in a complicated world. We still live in arenas, though now they are digital, and we still play the role of crowd, emperor, and gladiator all at once. As evening falls over Rome, the Colosseum glows in golden light. Tourists trickle away, the streets grow quiet, and the arches stand silhouetted against the setting sun. Inside, shadows deepen, and silence returns. But if you listen closely, you can almost hear it. The faint echo of a roar, the hiss of a blade, the breathless pause before a thumb turns. And perhaps that is why the Colosseum endures. Not because of its stones, but because of its stories. Not because of its arches, but because of its gestures. The thumb, raised or lowered, pressed or extended, is still alive in us. It binds us to the Romans across 2,000 years, reminding us that history is not distant, it is in our hands. So the next time you raise a thumb, whether in a photo, a post, a gesture to a friend, remember this place. Remember the crowd, the sand, the emperor. Remember that your gesture carries with it the weight of centuries, the legacy of Rome, the echo of the Colosseum. The amphitheater is silent now, but the thumb still rules. The story of the thumb belongs to Rome, yes, but not to Rome alone. If we step beyond the Colosseum's arches and look across the ancient world, we find that human beings everywhere have used their hands as instruments of judgment and power. The thumb may be Rome's most famous contribution, but the language of the body is as old as humanity itself, woven through cultures, religions, and civilizations. Let us travel first to Greece, the cradle of democracy. In the Athenian assembly, citizens debated laws and policies. But when the time came to decide, words were not enough. Votes were cast by the raising of hands, cherotonia. Thousands of arms lifted into the air, a forest of human will. It was not private, not secret. It was public, visible, collective. Every hand was a voice, every gesture a verdict. Unlike Rome's thumb, which decided life and death, the Athenian hand decided the shape of society itself. Yet the principle was the same. The body spoke where words ended. In Greek theater, too, gestures mattered. Actors wore masks that concealed expression, so their hands carried the burden of emotion. A clenched fist could signal rage, an open palm, supplication. The audience, seated in semicircular theaters carved into hillsides, watched not just dialogue, but choreography of hands. The Greeks, like the Romans after them, knew that gestures struck deeper than words. From Greece, let us journey to Egypt, where hieroglyphs carved into stone show pharaohs with hands raised in blessing or smiting enemies. The smiting pose, seen in countless reliefs, depicts the ruler with one arm lifted, weapon poised, the other gripping a captive's hair. It is a gesture of absolute power, frozen in stone for eternity. The pharaoh's hand was not just his own, it was Egypt's will, a divine command embodied in a gesture. Religion carried this symbolism further. Priests lifted hands in offering to the gods, holding ankhs and scepters as symbols of life and rule. The gesture was both ritual and communication, bridging mortal and divine. Much as the Roman emperor's thumb symbolized judgment, the pharaoh's hand symbolized dominion over chaos. Now turn eastward to China. In ancient rituals, hand positions, mudras, conveyed authority and harmony with the cosmos. The emperor, known as the Son of Heaven, ruled through the mandate of heaven, but he demonstrated it with ceremonies where his body was central. Hands raised in specific gestures aligned earthly rule with cosmic order. Even in martial arts, gestures of the hand, open palm, clenched fist, carried layers of meaning, from respect to aggression. In India, mudras developed into a vast symbolic language. In Hindu and Buddhist art, gods and Buddhas are depicted with hands posed in gestures that signify fearlessness, compassion, teaching, or meditation. The raised hand, palm outward, means protection, do not fear. The hand extended downward means generosity, I give. These are not unlike the Roman thumb. Simple motions, instantly readable, embodying profound decisions. Life, death, mercy, wisdom, all communicated without words. Across the ancient Americas, too, gestures played crucial roles. In Maya art, rulers are shown pointing or extending hands in ritual acts, distributing power or sacrifice. Among the Inca, handshakes sealed alliances. In North American tribes, hand signals formed part of communication across languages, especially on the Great Plains. A single hand could greet, threaten, or invite peace. The universality is striking. Everywhere, humans turn to their hands to embody choice, authority, fate. Rome's thumb may seem unique, but it is one expression of a deeper truth. We trust our bodies to speak when words falter. Let us linger a moment in the world of religion, where the hand remains sacred. In Christianity, the blessing gesture, 3 fingers extended for the Trinity, 2 folded for the dual nature of Christ, became central to iconography. Christ Pantocrator, painted in Byzantine mosaics, raises his right hand in blessing, a gesture repeated by priests for centuries. In Islam, hands lifted in prayer signify submission to God, palms open to receive mercy. In Judaism, the priestly blessing, with fingers parted in a symbolic pattern, transmits holiness to the people. These gestures are not casual. They are deliberate, codified, charged with meaning. And they remind us that the Roman thumb, too, was ritual. It was not a random wave of the hand, but a symbol understood by thousands, a verdict embodied in flesh. Consider also the courtroom, then and now. In medieval Europe, juries delivered verdicts by hand signals. In some towns, the accused was acquitted if the jury raised hands in favor, condemned if they lowered them. In modern courts, the raised hand is still present. In the oath, when a witness swears to tell the truth, hand aloft. The gesture is binding, transforming words into sacred promise. Sports provide another parallel. The referee's raised arm signals a foul. A whistle and downward motion cancels a play. 2 hands raised mean victory. Athletes raise arms in triumph. Audiences clap in rhythm. Entire stadiums move as one body. We are still Romans, still Greeks, still Egyptians, channeling judgment and emotion through the language of the hand. Now return for a moment to Rome's ambiguity. We puzzle over whether the thumb was pressed or extended, up or down. But perhaps the very ambiguity is the point. Rome gave us not a direction, but a principle, that judgment can be embodied in a gesture, simple yet absolute. Other cultures filled the same role with raised hands, with open palms, with blessing signs. Rome chose the thumb, but the story is universal. Fast forward to today, and we see the echoes everywhere. Think of the raised fist in protest marches. Think of the peace sign at concerts. Think of the handshake sealing business deals. Think of the wave goodbye, the clap of applause, the OK sign. All are fragments of a timeless language, as primal as the Colosseum's roar. And at the center of this language still stands the thumb. When you give a thumbs up on social media, you are not just approving a post, you are participating in a ritual older than Rome, a ritual of judgment, affirmation, connection. When you give a thumbs down, you echo not only Jerome's painted Romans, but perhaps Marshall's crowd shouting, "Ugula!" The thumb, then, is not merely Roman, It is human. It is one branch of a vast tree of gesture that spreads across civilizations. Rome gave it drama. Jerome gave it clarity. The digital age gave it universality. But the roots run deeper, into the soil of human instinct, into the need for our hands to speak where words falter. So as you drift into thought, imagine the world as a vast theater of gestures. In Athens, a forest of raised hands in the assembly. In Egypt, a pharaoh smiting with an uplifted arm. In India, a Buddha calming with a raised palm. In Rome, a crowd of thumbs rising and falling. In our own time, billions of digital thumbs flickering across screens. Different languages, different cultures, one truth. The hand rules. And perhaps that is why the thumb fascinates us still. Because in it we see not only Rome, but ourselves. We see the eternal human desire to simplify judgment into a gesture, to compress fate into a flick of the hand. The Colosseum may have given it theater, but the world gave it context, and we, today, give it continuity. When we look at the thumb in our time, we see a paradox, a contradiction that mirrors our own age. The very gesture that once decided life and death in the Colosseum now sits at the heart of digital culture, reborn as a symbol of positivity, of approval, of connection. And yet, behind its smiling face lies the shadow of its past. For the same thumb that raises in approval can lower in condemnation, and with it comes the weight of judgment that is as merciless online as it was in Rome. Think of the like button. When Facebook introduced it in 2009, it seemed innocent, almost playful, a thumbs up, nothing more. A way to say, I see you, I appreciate this, I agree. It was simple, clear, universal. Across languages and cultures, the thumb was instantly understood. Soon, billions of people were raising their digital thumbs daily, granting approval with a tap of the finger. The consequences were profound. A gesture once made in the heat of the Colosseum now shaped the architecture of the Internet. Posts with many likes rose to prominence, amplified by algorithms. Posts with few likes sank into obscurity. The thumb became currency, deciding what lived and what died in the digital arena. Just as the gladiators' fate once hung on a gesture, so too did the fate of ideas, jokes, news, and reputations. But the like button also changed us. It conditioned us to seek approval constantly. Each notification, each thumb raised in our favor, triggered small bursts of dopamine, rewarding us like applause from a crowd. We became performers in a new Colosseum, fighting not with swords, but with images, words, and memes, striving for the crowd's approval. The thumb, smiling in blue pixels, ruled us as surely as it ruled the gladiators. And then came its darker twin, the dislike, the thumbs down. Not all platforms embraced it, but where it appeared, its effect was brutal. A single glance told you whether the crowd approved or condemned. Videos drowned in dislikes carried the sting of public rejection. The crowd's verdict was visible, merciless, permanent. Here lies the paradox. The thumbs up is seen as friendly, cheerful, harmless, but behind it lurks the same principle as the Roman thumb, judgment. Approval for some means disapproval for others. For every post that rises, another sinks. For every gladiator saved, another condemned. The crowd still rules, and the thumb is still its weapon. This duality has bred what we now call cancel culture. With enough thumbs turned against you, your voice can vanish from platforms, your reputation destroyed, your career ended. No blood spills, but the effect is the same: exclusion, erasure, symbolic death. The Colosseum lives on, not in stone, but in servers. The sand is digital, the roars are comments, the verdict is still a thumb. Consider the irony. In Rome, mercy was shown by hiding the thumb, pressing it into the fist. Death came with an extended thumb, unsheathed like a sword. In our world, we extend the thumb to show approval, and we point it down to condemn. We have inverted the signs, but not the system. We still live by gestures, still crave clarity, still demand verdicts. Why do we cling to such simplicity? Perhaps because the modern world overwhelms us with noise. Words multiply endlessly. Opinions clash. Nuance confuses. A gesture cuts through. Like or dislike. Up or down. Yes or no. It is the oldest human instinct dressed in digital clothes. But simplicity comes at a cost. Gladiators were judged not on their entire lives, but on a single performance. Today, people are often judged not on their whole selves, but on a single post, a single phrase, a single moment. The thumb delivers verdicts without context, without mercy. The crowd, empowered by anonymity, can be more ruthless than any Roman audience. Yet, just as in Rome, there is also beauty in this ritual. A thumbs up can save someone from despair, offering connection across distance. A flood of approval can lift a voice, spread a truth, amplify a cause. The raised thumb can unite strangers, build communities, inspire movements. It is not only a weapon, but a bridge. Not only a verdict, but a gift. Think of the Arab Spring, when protesters across the Middle East used social media to rally, their voices amplified by countless thumbs raised in solidarity. Think of movements for justice, where a single post shared and liked millions of times became a rallying cry. Think of the pandemic, when people isolated in their homes found comfort in small gestures of digital approval, reminders that they were not alone. The thumb today is both mercy and death, kindness and cruelty, community and exclusion. It is our paradox, our inheritance from Rome. But what does this say about us? That we are still Romans at heart. We still gather in arenas, though now they are virtual. We still crave the drama of judgment, the thrill of decision, the unity of shared gestures. We still raise our hands, still turn our thumbs, still live by the language of the body. The question is whether we can use the thumb wisely. Rome's crowds often demanded death, driven by bloodlust. But they also sometimes pressed their thumbs in mercy, sparing those who fought bravely. We too must choose how to wield our gestures. Do we raise our thumbs to uplift or to destroy? Do we use our power as crowd and emperor wisely, or do we revel in cruelty? This is the challenge of our age. The thumb is no longer confined to the Colosseum. It is everywhere, all the time, in every hand. Each of us holds the power once reserved for emperors. Each of us can condemn or save with a flick. We are all rulers now, and the world is our arena. As you drift deeper into thought, imagine again the Colosseum. A gladiator kneels, the crowd surges, hands rise. But this time, imagine the crowd is the world, and the gladiator is any one of us, exposed to the gaze of millions. The emperor is no longer one man in purple. The emperor is us, all of us, our collective thumbs hovering in judgment. And ask yourself, when the moment comes, when the hand must move, which way will your thumb turn? If the Colosseum was Rome's theater of power, then the thumb was its ballot. With a flick of the hand, a crowd decided whether a man would live or die. It was democracy in miniature, distilled into gesture. Not everyone voted in Rome's assemblies, not everyone had a voice in government, but in the amphitheater, every spectator shared in judgment. The thumb was the crowd's collective will, compressed into flesh and bone. This is where our story turns toward democracy. For what is democracy, if not the ritual of collective decision? From raised hands in Athens to paper ballots in modern nations, humans have always sought ways to transform the chaos of many voices into one verdict. The thumb in Rome was one such way, a crude ancestor of the systems we now call votes, elections, referenda. Let us return first to Athens. In the 5th century before Christ, thousands of citizens gathered on the Pnyx Hill to debate and decide. Their voices clashed, their speeches filled the air, but in the end, decision came not from words but from hands. A forest of arms lifted in agreement or rejection. This gesture, chirotonia, the stretching forth of the hand, was the essence of democracy. Visible, immediate, public. No secrecy, no privacy. The citizen's power was in his hand, raised for all to see. Rome, by contrast, limited its assemblies more tightly. Votes were cast with tablets, but the amphitheater gave the people a taste of collective decision in a more visceral form. The thumb was not a formal ballot, but it was a ritual of judgment. In the games, emperors sought legitimacy through the crowd's approval, and the crowd expressed it with hand gestures. The arena became a rehearsal for politics, a stage where emperor and people negotiated power. Centuries later, as medieval Europe slowly rebuilt forms of collective decision, gestures remained central. In town councils, hands were raised to approve measures. In village assemblies, farmers lifted arms to support or oppose. In guild halls, members voted openly, their bodies speaking in unison. Words might be written later, but the hand was the moment of truth. With the rise of parliaments in the Renaissance, gestures continued. In England, members of parliament shouted aye or nay, but when doubt remained, a division was called. Men rose to their feet or raised their hands, visible proof of decision. In Switzerland, the Landsgemeinde still survives in some cantons. Citizens gather in open squares, raising hands to pass laws, a direct descendant of Athens, a sibling of Rome. But modern democracy took a different path. It demanded secrecy, anonymity, protection from intimidation. The ballot was born. First with pebbles, then with tokens, finally with paper slips dropped into boxes. The hand was hidden, the gesture concealed. Judgment became private. No longer did citizens need to display their choice to the crowd. No longer was the vote a gesture, but a mark on paper, folded away, counted in silence. And yet, the old desire for visible unity never vanished. Think of mass rallies where crowds raise arms in salute, parades where hands wave in rhythm, political gatherings where thousands lift signs or fists. Democracy may rely on hidden ballots, but its spirit still craves the spectacle of gestures. Leaders know this, and they cultivate it. The wave, the handshake, the victory sign, all are modern echoes of Rome's thumb, ways to bind the crowd to decision through visible motion. Consider the photograph of Winston Churchill flashing the V sign in World War II, two fingers raised in defiance. Consider Martin Luther King Jr. clasping hands with fellow marchers, the gesture of unity embodied in flesh. Consider crowds at political rallies, fists raised in solidarity, palms lifted in blessing, arms stretched toward a leader. These are votes of a kind, immediate and emotional, even if the formal ballot comes later. Now think of referenda, the closest modern cousin of Rome's collective judgment. Entire nations gather not in one amphitheater, but in countless polling stations. Ballots replace thumbs, but the principle is the same. The people decide. The fate of policies, leaders, even nations rests on the collective hand, now disguised as ink or paper. The roar of the Colosseum has become the quiet shuffle of ballots, but the thrill remains. Elections themselves are spectacles filled with gestures. Candidates raise hands to wave, shake hands to connect, press palms to hearts to show sincerity. Supporters respond with claps, waves, raised thumbs. Cameras capture these moments, broadcasting them like ancient theater. The gesture, as much as the word, carries power. And here we see the paradox again. Democracy hides the individual hand in secret ballots, but still relies on the spectacle of hands to build unity. It craves both privacy and performance, both the Colosseum's roar and the voting booth's silence. The thumb is gone from the ballot, but alive in the rally, in the crowd, in the media. But what makes the thumb unique is its simplicity. Raise it, and you approve. Lower it, and you condemn. No wonder social media adopted it so readily. Platforms are not parliaments. They thrive on speed, clarity, visibility. A ballot takes time, requires counting, demands patience. A thumb is instant. Tap once, and the crowd has spoken. Democracy distilled into pixels. The Colosseum reborn in digital form. And yet, here lies danger. Formal democracy has checks, balances, deliberation. The crowd's thumb has none. It is raw, emotional, often merciless. Rome's amphitheater reminds us how cruel such collective judgment can be. Modern likes and dislikes carry the same risk. They elevate spectacle, punish nuance, reward the loudest, not the wisest. The crowd rules, but not always justly. This brings us back to the idea of collective power. The thumb in Rome was a weapon of the many, directed at the few. Modern democracy, too, is the power of the many, wielded through ballots. Both reveal humanity's hunger to share in decision, to participate in fate, to transform judgment into ritual. The forms change, but the impulse endures. Think of it this way. When you cast a ballot in an election, you are pressing your thumb into history, much as a Roman once pressed it into a fist for mercy. When you raise your hand in a rally, you echo the Athenians on the Pnyx. When you click a like, you echo the Colosseum. The hand is always there, binding us to our ancestors, connecting ancient gestures to modern politics. Perhaps this is why voting still carries such emotional weight. It is not just a mark on paper, it is the continuation of an ancient ritual. It is the thumb reborn, the gesture renewed, the crowd's voice preserved. We may no longer decide gladiators' lives, but we still decide fates, of leaders, of nations, of futures. So the next time you see a sea of hands raised in protest, or a flood of thumbs up on a post, or a quiet line of citizens casting ballots, remember the Colosseum. Remember the gladiator waiting, the crowd roaring, the emperor watching. The hand still rules, the thumb still decides, the crowd still judges. The form has changed, but the essence is eternal. And that essence is this: humanity trusts its hands more than its words. We crave the certainty of gesture, the clarity of yes or no, the thrill of shared motion. Rome gave us the thumb. Democracy gave us the ballot. Social media gave us the button. But all are the same story: the power of the many, expressed in the hand. The thumb began as a Roman gesture, a fragment of Latin poetry, a fleeting sign in the amphitheater. But over centuries it escaped the dust of history and became something larger, a cultural symbol, reshaped by artists, dramatists, and filmmakers. To understand why the image of the thumb endures so powerfully, we must trace its path through art and popular culture, where it was reborn again and again for new audiences. The Renaissance was the first stage of this rebirth. After the long centuries of the Middle Ages, when gladiators were remembered mostly as cruel curiosities or as martyrs' executioners, the revival of classical learning brought them back into the spotlight. Humanists rediscovered the texts of Juvenal, Martial, and Suetonius. Painters and sculptors, inspired by ancient ruins, filled canvases and marble with reimagined Roman scenes. Gladiators appeared not as brutish slaves, but as heroic figures, embodiments of struggle, courage, and tragic beauty. Here, the thumb began to find new direction. The ambiguity of Latin confused scholars, but dramatists needed clarity. A stage audience could not puzzle over whether pollice verso meant thumb turned up, down, or sideways. They needed spectacle. And so the gesture was fixed. A thumb thrust downward condemned, a thumb raised spared. In the hands of Renaissance actors, emperors on stage performed verdicts with theatrical flourish, their thumbs ruling lives as surely as in the Colosseum. Opera magnified this further. In the grand theaters of Europe, stories of gladiators and tyrants were retold with music and passion. The gesture of the thumb became a visual climax, punctuating arias of mercy or rage. The audience thrilled not only to the music, but to the familiarity of the sign. The thumb was becoming universal, its meaning woven into the language of performance. But it was in the 19th century that the image reached its fullest power. Painters of the Romantic and academic schools, hungry for drama and spectacle, turned to Rome as their great stage. Among them, Jean-Léon Gérôme stood supreme. His Pollice Verso, unveiled in 1872, showed the Colosseum in all its imagined glory. The crowd roaring, the emperor aloof, the gladiators straining, and above all, the thumbs of Roman women turned down in ruthless demand for death. The painting was a sensation. Viewers felt transported to antiquity. Critics praised its archaeological detail, the helmets, the armor, the stone arches, and its emotional intensity. But above all, they remembered the gesture. Gérôme had given shape to ambiguity, freezing forever the idea of the thumbs down as the symbol of condemnation. From that moment, the myth became truth. The world believed that Romans condemned with thumbs down and spared with thumbs up, even though scholars warned otherwise. Gérôme had painted not history, but memory. His influence spread quickly. Other painters followed his lead, filling canvases with gladiatorial scenes where emperors condemned with a downward thumb. Sculptors carved it in marble, illustrators etched it into books. The gesture became shorthand for Rome itself: decadence, cruelty, spectacle. And then came cinema. The 20th century transformed Gérôme's canvas into moving image, reaching audiences on a scale no painting could match. Silent films like Quo Vadis, 1913, and Ben-Hur, 1925, staged grand gladiatorial battles, complete with emperors lowering their thumbs to the roar of extras filling reconstructed arenas. The audience gasped, cheered, wept. They needed no Latin footnotes. The gesture told the story instantly. By the time Hollywood's golden age arrived, the thumbs down was inseparable from gladiators. Films like Demetrius and the Gladiators, 1954, and Spartacus, 1960, repeated the image with lavish sets and swelling music. Kirk Douglas, kneeling in chains, awaited the emperor's thumb. Laurence Olivier raised his hand with calculated cruelty. Audiences worldwide recognized the gesture, even if they had never read a line of Martial. But perhaps no film cemented it more deeply than Ridley Scott's Gladiator, 2000. Joaquin Phoenix as Commodus, draped in white and gold, sat in the Emperor's box, relishing the crowd's silence as he hovered his hand. His thumb wavered, poised between life and death. Then, with a flick, he turned it downward. The crowd erupted, and with it, so did cinema audiences across the globe. The moment was iconic, unforgettable. It confirmed what Jerome had painted a century earlier. The thumb down is death. The thumb up is life. What is remarkable is how this cinematic myth leapt beyond Gladiators to permeate all of culture. In cartoons, villains receive thumbs down from audiences. In sports, crowds flash thumbs up to cheer, thumbs down to boo. In comedy, the exaggerated lowering of the thumb signals failure, flop, rejection. Children learn the gesture before they learn its history, as natural as nodding or shaking the head. Even advertising embraced it. Companies used the thumbs up to sell products, promising approval, positivity, popularity. Thumbs up became a slogan, a brand, a guarantee of quality. The gesture, once soaked in blood, was reborn as cheer. Yet the shadow never vanished. Rock bands named albums thumbs down. Political cartoons used the gesture to skewer leaders, emperors of a new age condemned by the crowd. Satire, theater, news media all leaned on the thumb to convey judgment instantly. And so, across art and culture, the thumb became both ancient and modern, both Roman and universal. Jerome gave it drama, cinema gave it universality, and popular culture gave it endless reinvention. It is a language without words, a story told in a flick, a myth more powerful than fact. But what does this tell us about humanity? That we love symbols, we crave clarity, we need stories we can see. The Latin poets left us ambiguity, but artists refused it. They gave us certainty, even if it was false, because certainty satisfies imagination. Jerome painted what we wanted to believe, and we still believe it. Perhaps this is the true legacy of art. It does not merely reflect history, it shapes it. The thumb we imagine in Rome is not Rome's thumb at all. It is Jerome's thumb, Hollywood's thumb, our own. But because it resonates, because it tells a story so perfectly, we accept it as truth. The Colosseum is a ruin, but its myth lives in paint, film, and culture. So, when you watch a gladiator fall on screen, when you see an emperor's hand hover, when you laugh at a cartoon villain condemned by a thumbs down, remember the chain of imagination. Martial wrote Polus Verso. Renaissance actors decided it meant down. Jerome painted it. Hollywood filmed it. And now it lives in us. Reflexive, unquestioned. The thumb is more than a gesture. It is a canvas upon which artists have painted judgment for centuries. It is theater distilled into flesh, cinema condensed into a finger. It is history reshaped by culture until fact and fiction blur into one enduring symbol. And in this sense, the thumb may be Rome's greatest artistic gift, not its accuracy, but its drama. The roar of the Colosseum was intoxicating. 50,000 voices rising as one, demanding mercy or death, was a sound that could lift a man to glory or plunge him into despair. For the gladiator on the sand, the crowd's will was irresistible. For the emperor in his box, it was both a gift and a threat. The collective voice of Rome gave legitimacy, but it also demanded blood. To disappoint the crowd was to risk its fury. This is the paradox of collective judgment. It gives power, but it also devours. And throughout history, the roar of the Colosseum has echoed in other arenas, in other times, where crowds gathered not only to watch, but to judge, not only to cheer, but to condemn. After Rome fell silent, medieval Europe found new stages for collective judgment. Public executions became spectacles that drew thousands. In town squares, criminals were hanged, burned, or beheaded, and the crowd gathered not merely to witness, but to participate. They jeered, they cheered, they threw stones or garbage. They applauded when the blade fell. The executioner became performer, the scaffold a stage, the condemned a reluctant actor in society's theater of justice. The thumb was absent, but the principle remained. The crowd decided the meaning of the moment. A condemned man who met death bravely might win admiration, even sympathy. His name whispered with respect. One who begged or faltered earned contempt. The collective voice judged not only the crime, but the character, sealing reputations as surely as the sword sealed lives. In France, during the Revolution, the guillotine became the new Colosseum. Crowds filled the squares of Paris, eager to watch the blade fall. They cried for death, roared approval, hissed disapproval. Heads rolled, and the people felt their power affirmed. The guillotine was not just an instrument of execution, it was a theater of democracy, the people's will made visible in steel and blood. The price, of course, was terrible. The crowd's hunger for spectacle turned justice into frenzy. Innocence and guilt blurred in the roar. Like Rome, France discovered that collective judgment can slip easily into cruelty, that the crowd's voice is not always merciful. In England, the pillory served a similar role. Offenders were locked in wooden frames, exposed to the public scorn. Crowds gathered to hurl rotten vegetables, insults, sometimes stones. The punishment was not the wood itself, but the people, their collective fury unleashed. It was judgment embodied not in a thumb, but in thousands of hands and voices. Even in America, the public trial and execution once drew crowds. The last public hanging in the United States in 1936 attracted thousands of spectators. Photographs show them smiling, children perched on shoulders, the condemned man dangling above them. It was spectacle, Colosseum reborn. What unites all these scenes is the same paradox. The people crave to judge together, but the judgment of the many is often harsher than the judgment of one. Crowds strip away nuance, simplify morality, demand clarity. Yes or no, guilty or innocent, life or death. The thumb's old logic survives. And now, in the digital age, the arena has shifted once more. We no longer gather in squares to watch guillotines, no longer fill amphitheaters to cheer gladiators. Instead, we gather online, billions of us, our roars silent but no less powerful. The stage is social media. The condemned are public figures, politicians, celebrities, sometimes ordinary people, caught in controversy. The verdict is delivered not by thumb in flesh, but by thumb in pixels. Consider the phenomenon we call cancel culture. A person makes a statement, perhaps careless, perhaps offensive, perhaps misunderstood. Screenshots spread, comments multiply, hashtags trend. The crowd gathers, digital voices rising. Thumbs down accumulate in the form of dislikes, angry emojis, critical posts. Sponsors withdraw, employers distance themselves, platforms ban. The condemned may not die, But their career, reputation, livelihood can vanish. It is Rome again. The crowd judges swiftly, emotionally, collectively. The emperor is gone. The people are sovereign. And yet, as in Rome, mercy is rare once the roar begins. The collective voice demands clarity, not nuance. Apologies may be mocked, explanations dismissed. The crowd wants verdict, not debate. The thumb still turns. Some argue this is justice, the powerful held accountable, the voiceless given strength through numbers. Others warn it is mob rule, destructive, merciless, prone to error. Both may be true, for the power of collective judgment is double-edged. It can protect or destroy, uplift or crush, save or condemn. Think of the gladiator who fought bravely, spared because the crowd pressed their thumbs in mercy. Now think of the performer who earns waves of digital approval, their art amplified, their voice celebrated. The raised thumb still saves. Then think of the gladiator who faltered, the crowd demanding his death. Now think of the politician, actor, or writer drowned in outrage, their reputation severed by a storm of thumbs down. The thumb still kills. What makes this so powerful is participation. Alone, a gesture is small. Together, thousands, millions of gestures become irresistible. The gladiator could not ignore the roar of the Colosseum. No modern figure can ignore the storm of social media. The crowd always wins. But what is the cost to the crowd itself? In Rome, the people gained a sense of power, but also fed their cruelty. In France, the revolution devoured its own. In our time, digital outrage can consume days, weeks, leaving participants exhausted, cynical, divided. The crowd feels powerful, but often powerless too, for judgment does not always bring change. The thumb, then, teaches us a lesson. Collective judgment is intoxicating, but dangerous. It unites us, but it can also corrupt us. It gives voice, but it can also silence. It creates theater, but it often destroys truth. Perhaps that is why the thumb endures as symbol. It embodies both sides of human nature, mercy and cruelty, unity and division, justice and vengeance. When the crowd raises or lowers its hands, it reveals not only its verdict, but its character. So, as you listen tonight, imagine the continuum, the Colosseum's roar, the guillotine's cheer, the pillory's jeers, the click of digital thumbs. Different arenas, same impulse. Humanity always returns to the theater of judgment, always craves the simplicity of gesture, always risks the cruelty of the crowd. The question we must ask is not whether the thumb will rule, it always will, but whether we can teach it mercy. In the theater of politics, words matter, but gestures matter even more. Leaders rise and fall not only by what they say, but by how they move, how they look, how they command the stage. From the marble forums of ancient Rome to the televised debates of modern democracies, the body has always been part of the message. And at the heart of this silent language lies the thumb. Julius Caesar understood this well. The stories tell us that when he returned in triumph to Rome, the crowd's adoration was not merely in cheers, but in gestures. Raised arms, open hands, visible signs of loyalty. Caesar himself used gestures strategically. He extended his hand to soldiers, clasped their arms in brotherhood, raised his palm to silence, lifted his thumb to command. He knew that the body could rule as powerfully as the sword. After him, emperors perfected the art. On coins, Augustus was shown with raised right hand, signaling peace and authority. On reliefs, emperors offered gestures of clemency, open palms toward the people. But in the amphitheater, the thumb reigned. Whether they truly turned it up or down as later imagined hardly matters. What matters is that the people believed the emperor's gesture carried the force of life and death. To sit in the imperial box and move a single finger was to embody absolute power. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, and kings used similar strategies. A monarch, blessing his people, raised his hand, fingers extended in imitation of Christ.
To knight a warrior, he laid his hand upon the shoulder. To condemn, he pointed. In coronation ceremonies, the gesture of placing the crown was accompanied by lifted hands of blessing. Like Rome's thumb, these movements were ritualized, visible, unforgettable. The Renaissance rediscovered the power of gestures with new vigor. Rulers posed for portraits with carefully chosen hand positions, one thumb resting on a sword hilt, another finger pointing to a map, a hand extended in command. These images told stories without words: strength, wisdom, authority. A thumb pressing on a globe suggested dominion. A hand clasped in prayer suggested piety. Painters understood that the body spoke as loudly as the crown. In the modern age, politics entered the era of mass communication. With newspapers, photography, and later film and television, gestures became magnified, reaching millions. Leaders quickly learned that their hands were as important as their speeches. Franklin Roosevelt's hand raised in calm reassurance. Winston Churchill's V sign flashing defiance. John F. Kennedy's open-palmed gestures of sincerity. These were not accidents, but strategies. The thumb, in particular, took on new significance in this age. Unlike a pointed finger, which can seem accusatory, or an open palm, which can seem weak, the thumb strikes a balance. Held upright, it conveys strength without aggression, authority without hostility. Politicians learn to point with their thumb tucked over their fingers, a gesture sometimes called the politician's thumb. It allows direction without seeming rude, emphasis without seeming domineering. Consider Ronald Reagan, the great communicator. He often used the closed fist with thumb atop, a gesture that felt both firm and approachable. Bill Clinton adopted the same style, punctuating his speeches with thumb-pointing motions that seemed to include the audience rather than scold them.
Barack Obama mastered a similar rhythm, using his thumb to mark cadence, his hand movements precise, deliberate, persuasive. Each of these leaders knew, consciously or instinctively, that the thumb carried weight. And then there is the more direct use, the thumbs up. Richard Nixon, resigning in disgrace, gave a double thumbs up as he boarded the helicopter, a strange gesture of defiance or denial. George W. Bush often used the thumbs up to signal optimism, even in difficult times, projecting confidence to the public. Donald Trump made the thumbs up one of his signature gestures, flashing it in photographs, rallies, and press conferences as shorthand for success, approval, dominance. Here we see how the thumb has become a political tool. It is quick, visible, universal. Unlike words, which may be misinterpreted or lost in translation, the thumbs up is clear across cultures. A crowd may not understand English or Latin, but it understands the gesture. In an age of global media, that clarity is priceless. But gestures are not always innocent. A raised thumb can inspire trust, but it can also manipulate. Crowds respond emotionally, instinctively, often without reflection. A leader who masters gestures can bypass reason, speaking directly to the body. This was the genius and the terror of totalitarian regimes in the 20th century.
Fascist salutes, communist fist raises, choreographed mass gestures turned individuals into a single body, unified in movement, stripped of dissent. The thumb fits easily into this pattern. It reduces complex politics into a binary: approve or reject, yes or no, with us or against us. In the Colosseum, the gladiators' fate hung on this simplicity. In modern politics, policies and leaders are judged the same way, often without nuance. Social media has amplified this, reducing debate to thumbs up or down, likes or dislikes, applause or boos. And yet, the power of the thumb cannot be denied. It has become a symbol not only of authority, but of accessibility. When a politician gives a thumbs up to the crowd, it feels informal, personal, human. It bridges the distance between stage and audience. It says, "I am one of you." The emperor's gesture has been repurposed as the populist's gesture, the sign of solidarity rather than superiority. Still, the ghost of Rome lingers. When a leader raises his thumb, the crowd cheers. When he lowers it, even metaphorically, someone is condemned. An opponent mocked, a policy destroyed, a rival defeated. The Colosseum never vanished, it merely changed form. Parliament, press conferences, televised debates, all are new arenas where the thumb still decides. Think of the images engraved in our minds. Caesar raising his hand to command, Churchill flashing the V, Nixon's double thumbs up of denial, Obama punctuating speeches with thumb-pointing gestures, Trump's relentless thumbs up, almost like a brand. Each of these images tells us that politics is not only words, not only policies, but theater. The thumb is part of the script, part of the performance, part of the persuasion. As we reflect on this, one truth emerges. Power is not only spoken, it is shown. And the thumb, raised, lowered, pressed, or pointed, is one of the oldest, clearest ways of showing it. From emperors to presidents, from forums to social media, the thumb is still the digit of decision, the finger of fate. So next time you see a politician raise his thumb, ask yourself, what does it mean? Is it reassurance or dominance, sincerity or performance? Is it mercy or judgment?
Remember the Colosseum? Remember Jerome's painting? Remember the roar of the crowd. The gesture has history, and history always speaks. Long before it was a symbol of mercy or death in the Colosseum, the thumb was a miracle of evolution. Without it, there would be no swords, no pens, no violins, no smartphones. The thumb is what makes us human. To understand why its gestures carry such power, we must step back, far before Rome, to the dawn of our species. Unlike most animals, humans, and our primate cousins, possess opposable thumbs. This simple anatomical feature, the ability of the thumb to touch the tips of the other fingers, transformed our destiny. It allowed us to grasp branches, shape tools, throw spears, paint caves, and write alphabets. The thumb turned hands into instruments not just of survival, but of expression. Our very civilization rests upon it. Because of this, the thumb occupies a special place in our brains. Neuroscientists studying the motor cortex, the strip of the brain that controls movement, discovered something astonishing. The thumb takes up enormous space in this map of the body, far more than its size would suggest. This is true also in the sensory cortex, which receives information from the skin. Our brains dedicate disproportionate attention to the thumb because it is crucial for precision, grip, and touch. This explains why gestures involving the thumb are so visible, so significant, so emotionally charged. Our brains are wired to notice them.
A raised thumb leaps out at us, demanding attention. A lowered thumb feels like rejection in the most primal sense. It is not simply cultural, it is neurological. Psychologists studying body language confirm this. Hands are among the most expressive parts of the body, second only to the face. Within the hand, the thumb is dominant. Open hands with visible thumbs signal honesty and openness. Hidden thumbs, tucked into fists or pockets, suggest anxiety or deceit. A raised thumb signals approval, confidence, dominance. A downward thumb signals rejection, exclusion, scorn. These reactions are nearly universal, transcending language. Consider infants. Long before they learn to speak, babies use their hands to communicate. They grasp, point, wave, and yes, they suck their thumbs, a gesture of comfort, of self-soothing, rooted in biology. The thumb is the first tool of expression, the first companion of the newborn. Small wonder it remains emotionally charged throughout life. Anthropologists argue that gestures evolved as proto-language, the bridge between animal signals and human speech. Before words, we raised hands, pointed fingers, clenched fists, and yes, raised thumbs. Even today, when language surrounds us, gestures remain essential. They reinforce meaning, reveal emotion, and sometimes contradict spoken words. A politician may say, "Trust me," but if his thumbs are hidden, we hesitate. The body speaks louder than the mouth. Experiments reveal how deeply this runs. In one study, participants were asked to watch images of hands making various gestures. Brain scans showed strong responses not only in motor areas, but in emotional centers like the amygdala. A thumbs up triggered positive reactions, while a thumbs down triggered negative ones, even when participants knew the gestures were arbitrary symbols. Our brains cannot help but attach meaning to the thumb. Evolutionary psychology offers an explanation. For our ancestors, survival depended on quick, clear communication. Gestures of approval built trust and cohesion. Gestures of rejection warned of danger, exclusion, or punishment. The thumb, with its visibility and flexibility, became an ideal tool for such signals. Over generations, our brains adapted to read it instantly. But there is another layer, dominance. In primate groups, hand gestures often signal hierarchy. A chimpanzee exposing its palm signals submission. A dominant one may use its hand to strike or point. Humans inherited this instinct. A raised thumb can feel like dominance disguised as friendliness, a way of asserting control while seeming benign. This may explain why leaders favor the gesture. It is power wrapped in charm. And yet, the thumb is also paradoxical. It signals both vulnerability and strength, both inclusion and exclusion. Psychologists note that a hidden thumb suggests insecurity, while an exposed thumb signals confidence. But when the thumb points down, it flips into condemnation. The same digit that comforts a baby can condemn a gladiator. No wonder it fascinates us. It embodies our contradictions. Let us consider the role of the thumb in nonverbal communication across cultures. In the West, thumbs up means good, yes, approval. In parts of the Middle East, however, it can be offensive, akin to an obscene gesture. In Japan, the thumb represents man or male. In Germany, raising the thumb can mean one when counting. In Greece, pointing the thumb over the shoulder can mean get out. The variations remind us that gestures are both universal and local, shaped by biology but filtered through culture. Still, despite differences, the core remains. The thumb matters. It carries weight wherever it appears. A handshake without the thumb feels weak. A wave without the thumb feels incomplete. A fist with the thumb tucked inside looks childish, vulnerable. The thumb defines the hand's authority. From a psychological perspective, this matters deeply. Humans crave signals of belonging, of approval, of affirmation. A thumbs up provides this instantly. It tells us we are seen, valued, accepted. Conversely, a thumbs down threatens exclusion, rejection, shame. These are primal fears rooted in our evolution as social animals. To be excluded was once to risk death. To be included was to survive. The thumb still carries that ancient weight. Social psychologists studying online behavior have found that digital likes trigger the same reward pathways as food, sex, or money. A flood of thumbs up produces a rush of pleasure. A lack of them produces disappointment, even anxiety. The thumb has become a lever of emotion, manipulated by algorithms, shaping our moods and choices. It is the Colosseum reborn in the brain. But perhaps the deepest truth is this: the thumb reminds us that we are embodied beings. In a world of words, screens, abstractions, the hand grounds us in flesh. Gestures bypass intellect, striking directly at instinct. They are older than speech, older than writing, older than empire. The thumb is not just a finger. It is a bridge between body and meaning, biology and culture, past and present. So, when we raise our thumbs today, on a screen, in a stadium, in a handshake, we are not only communicating. We are reenacting an evolutionary story, echoing our ancestors, obeying neural pathways etched over millennia. We are part of a lineage that began in the trees, passed through the Colosseum, and now lights up in pixels. The thumb, then, is not merely history. It is humanity itself, condensed into a gesture. When we look at the thumb not as anatomy or history, but as symbol, something remarkable emerges. This small digit, simple in appearance, has become one of humanity's most profound metaphors. It carries within it ideas of fate, of power, of mercy and cruelty, of inclusion and exclusion. To study the thumb is to study philosophy itself. How humans imagine meaning, how they confront mortality, how they wrestle with their own capacity to judge. Let us begin with fate. In the Colosseum, the thumb was destiny incarnate. A flick upward or downward, pressed or extended, decided whether a man would live to see another sunrise or fall in the dust of the arena. No words were needed, no trial, no argument. The thumb was the embodiment of randomness disguised as ritual. To the gladiator kneeling on sand, the thumb was inexorable, like the wheel of fortune. He had fought bravely, but in the end it was the crowd's mood, the emperor's whim, the gesture of a hand that sealed his fate. This is why philosophers see in the thumb a symbol of life's arbitrariness. We like to believe in justice, in rationality, in merit. But often, like gladiators, we find our fates decided by forces beyond us. The opinion of a crowd, the flick of circumstance, the judgment of history. The thumb reminds us of the fragility of control. It teaches humility, or perhaps resignation. Yet the thumb is also power. For the one who moves it, the emperor, the leader, the crowd, it is intoxicating. To hold in one's hand the power of life and death is to feel divine. Nietzsche would call it the will to power, distilled into gesture. Not a speech, not an army, but a finger. The thumb is the smallest possible assertion of domination, a whisper of control that nonetheless commands the world.
And here lies the paradox. The thumb empowers both ruler and ruled. In Rome, the emperor's thumb was decisive, but the crowd's collective thumbs could sway him. It was a dialogue of power, compressed into flesh. This duality persists today. A politician raises his thumb, projecting strength. A crowd raises theirs in return, affirming or rejecting him. Power flows both ways, and the thumb is the channel. But there is another layer, mercy. To press the thumb inside the fist, as Marshall suggests, was to show compassion, to spare the fallen. Mercy is fragile, always a choice, never guaranteed. The thumb becomes the measure of our humanity. Can we resist cruelty, or do we revel in it? In this sense, the thumb is not only a symbol of fate, but of morality. It reflects the eternal struggle between justice and vengeance, between forgiveness and condemnation. Religions, too, have seen the thumb as symbol. The early church, reinterpreting the Colosseum, cast the thumb as judgment not of men, but of God. The crowd's gesture became a metaphor for divine will. Heaven's thumb, raised in blessing, lowered in wrath. In iconography, saints and Christ raise their hands in gestures of mercy, their thumbs extended in sacred signs. The thumb became a cipher for grace, for salvation, for the ultimate verdict of eternity. Philosophers of modern times read it differently. To them, the thumb is the reduction of complexity to binary, yes or no, life or death, approval or rejection. In this, it mirrors the human craving for clarity, for order in chaos. Kierkegaard might say it reflects the either-or of existence, the moment when choice is demanded, when ambiguity is crushed into decision. Sartre would see it as freedom embodied, the burden of choice made visible. To move the thumb is to choose, and in choosing, to bear responsibility for the consequences. But what of the condemned? For them, the thumb reveals another truth, the absurdity of existence. Imagine kneeling in the sand, your entire life reduced to a crowd's whim, a gesture's flick. Camus would see in this the absurd condition of humanity. We struggle, we strive, we fight, and yet meaning is decided by forces beyond us, arbitrary and indifferent. The gladiator is Sisyphus, condemned not to push a stone, but to await a thumb. Yet, paradoxically, the thumb also reveals dignity. To face judgment with courage, to accept fate without surrender, to meet the crowd's roar with calm, this is the essence of human greatness. The thumb may decide life or death, but it cannot decide the spirit with which one meets it. In this, the gladiator becomes a philosopher, showing that freedom is not in outcome, but in attitude. Beyond philosophy, the thumb has become a metaphor in literature. Writers use it to symbolize judgment, destiny, approval. Shakespeare's Macbeth speaks of the bloody thumbs as omens. Novelists describe villains condemned by thumbs down, lovers approved by thumbs up. The gesture permeates our imagination, a shorthand for fate. In psychology, the thumb reflects our need for validation. A raised thumb affirms our existence, tells us we belong. A lowered one threatens exclusion, isolation. Humans fear exile more than death, and the thumb embodies this fear. In this sense, the thumb is existential. It decides not only physical fate, but social fate, the right to belong in community. Consider also its symbolic inversion. In Rome, a thumb extended meant death. In modern times, it means approval. What does this reversal signify? Perhaps it shows humanity's longing for redemption, our need to transform cruelty into kindness, condemnation into affirmation. We took a symbol of death and remade it into a symbol of life. We rewrote history's gesture into hope. This is not mere accident, it is cultural alchemy, the transformation of suffering into meaning. But can we ever escape the shadow of cruelty? The digital age reminds us that the thumb's darker side persists. Likes uplift, dislikes destroy. Online mobs condemn with the same ruthlessness as Roman crowds. The thumb still kills, even if only reputations, careers, voices. The paradox remains unresolved: mercy or judgment, blessing or curse. And so, philosophers return to the question, what does the thumb truly symbolize? Is it freedom, power, mercy, cruelty, fate, or absurdity? Perhaps it is all of these, layered and inseparable. Perhaps that is why it fascinates us, why we cannot let it go. The thumb is more than flesh. It is a mirror of the human condition. It shows us our hunger for power, our capacity for mercy, our fear of exclusion, our longing for clarity, our struggle with fate. It is the smallest of gestures, but within it lies the weight of existence. As you reflect tonight, imagine your own hand. Imagine the thumb rising, lowering, pressing. Feel the choice it embodies, and ask yourself, what does your thumb mean? Mercy or judgment? Power or humility? Fate or freedom? For in the end, the thumb is not Rome's alone. It is ours. It is humanity itself, condensed into a flick of the hand. The stones of the Colosseum still breathe. Walk its corridors at twilight, when the crowds of tourists have gone and the arches glow in amber light, and you will feel it. The silence is not empty, it is charged, filled with echoes of voices long gone. Somewhere in the stone, in the dust, in the worn steps carved by centuries of feet, the past still lingers. Stand in the arena floor, or as close to it as one can now, and close your eyes. The present fades. You hear the hum of 50,000 Romans, the drumbeat of expectation, the roar as two gladiators clash. You hear the sudden hush when one falls, and then you feel it. The weight of thousands of hands, the collective breath of the crowd, the invisible but irresistible gesture of the thumb. Mercy or death, inclusion or exclusion, life or oblivion. When you open your eyes again, the arena is empty. The sand is gone, the gladiators are gone, the emperor is gone. But the gesture remains. It lives not in stone, but in us. That is the strange power of history. Buildings crumble, empires collapse, but symbols endure. The Colosseum is a ruin, yet the thumb thrives. It has outlived emperors, popes, kings, presidents. It has crossed cultures, languages, centuries. It has been painted, dramatized, filmed, digitized. It has shifted meanings, inverted itself, transformed from cruelty to kindness, from execution to approval. And yet it is still instantly understood. The thumb is proof that humanity craves simplicity in the face of complexity. Life is vast, chaotic, full of ambiguity, but the thumb cuts through. Yes or no, up or down. It is a comfort and a danger, a gift and a curse. It is the oldest emoji, the eternal verdict. And in our own time, we still live in arenas, not of stone, but of pixels. Our gladiators are performers, politicians, influencers, friends, sometimes even ourselves. We post, we perform, we wait. The crowd gathers, silent but immense, and the verdict comes in thumbs. Likes or dislikes, praise or condemnation.
The roar is quieter now, but no less powerful. In this, the Colosseum never died. It lives in our hands, in our phones, in our gestures to one another. We are all gladiators, and we are all emperors. We are judged, and we judge. We live by the thumb still. But perhaps there is hope in this recognition. If the thumb can change meaning, from a sign of death to a sign of approval, then so can we. If cruelty can become kindness, if condemnation can become affirmation, then perhaps humanity is capable of rewriting its symbols, of transforming old wounds into new wisdom. The thumb teaches us not only our cruelty, but our creativity, our power to reimagine. So as you listen tonight, as you let the echoes of Rome fade into the quiet of your own room, take a moment to look at your hand. Raise your thumb, lower it, press it into your fist. Feel its weight. Remember the gladiators, the emperors, the crowds. Remember Gérôme's painting, Hollywood's films, the blue icons on your screen. Remember that you carry 2,000 years of history in that gesture. And then ask yourself, how will you use it? To condemn or to uplift? To divide or to unite? To destroy or to build? The Colosseum no longer decides, we do. So tonight, may your thumb be raised not in cruelty, but in kindness. May it bring not death, but life. May it remind you that even the smallest gesture can carry the weight of centuries, the echo of humanity, the hope of mercy. Thank you for walking this journey through history with me. If you enjoyed it, if it gave you something to think about, I invite you to stay with us for more stories, more journeys, more echoes of the past. Until then, may your nights be peaceful, your dreams vivid, and your thumb always raised toward compassion.